Good morning. This morning I'm at an Airbnb in North Carolina. Very nice Airbnb. And I won't give any address or names, of course. The first name on the account is Lillian, and it's in, let's see, in near Murphy and Brasstown, North Carolina. Let me see where I am here. Oh, yes, it says Room in Marble, hosted by Lillian. So you can look it up anytime you're in Southern North Carolina. So this morning's practice, going to do some releasing, stretching. There's not a whole bunch of space I have here between the camera, so I'm not going to do a very dynamic flow, but more just stretching and releasing. And next, I'm actually on my way to a Thai massage continuing education. We have 3 days, so we'll do a half-hour practice here, ending with some meditation, and then that's what I'm actually going to be planning to do the next few days. This is the Thai massage, which should be very interesting. I've been a massage therapist since 2011, and this counts as my continuing education towards my license. Now for this morning, we'll start in a seated or kneeling posture. My back's feeling kind of rounded this morning, so it's easier for me to maintain kind of a neutral pelvis and a flatter, so to speak, back, or a neutral back. There are those natural curvatures, but instead of having it so rounded when I'm sitting in cross-legged, it's just easier for me to have that pelvic tilt, have the core braced instead of like this, and then opening my chest instead. Because after sitting in the car for 4 hours, 3-4 hours, a lot of times we're always like this. So it's great to just bring awareness to bracing the core and then opening the chest. We'll stay here for a few moments, taking some breaths, noticing the posture. Allowing ourselves to sink down into the ground. We can take our time moving onto the tabletop posture, all fours with the hands, wrists beneath the elbows, the shoulders, and the knees below the hips. It's moving around, feeling our wrists, flexing and extending a bit against the mat, and the hips moving. We'll move into a few cat-cow postures, inhaling and opening the chest, and exhaling, rounding. Noticing that the fingers are spread apart, and we can give a little stretch to the fingers as well as the wrists. With each inhale, maybe stretching back the shoulders down and away a bit, arching that upper back, or having a slight upper back extension. And then rounding. From here, we'll move into a downward facing dog. We can start with pedaling the feet first. Or extending straight back into down dog. Pressing the hips up towards the sky. Moving towards having a little more length in the legs. Taking a few breaths here. Lowering down to that seated posture again when we're ready. Maybe stretching the the toes a bit back. And then, if it's comfortable, placing tops of the feet against the mat and returning to the seated posture. Taking a few breaths here. We'll raise our arms overhead, reaching up towards the sky. Keeping in mind that the shoulders are kind of down away from the ears, so not bringing them up too much, but more focusing on that range of motion around the shoulder blades, the scapula. Bringing them up, seeing how it feels, and reaching through the fingertips. You can also bring the arms up and down a bit, kind of like a cactus posture. And then noticing that range of motion again in the scapulae. Then returning the arms down. We'll move into a mini vinyasa. Basically, it's going to be cobra or upward facing dog and then downward facing dog. Just opening up the chest again and the upper back. Pressing back into child's pose, bringing the forehead down towards the ground. Noticing that lengthening through the shoulders. Looking up towards the hands, coming up onto the tabletop and then lowering down with the knees on or off the mat. Letting the chest rest onto the ground or hovering in plank. Inhaling, raising the chest slightly, or moving into upward facing dog. This morning I'm going to cobra pose. It's like a mini back extension. Taking a breath and then pressing back into downward facing dog or tabletop, child's pose, and then coming into downward facing dog. Again, pedaling the feet or remaining here in stillness. Returning to the mat, and then coming back into that seated posture. We'll do that one more time. This time I'm going to demonstrate the upward facing dog to downward facing dog. So coming from the child's posture, and then moving into a plank, upward facing dog, and then downward facing dog. We'll start pressing back, lowering the head towards the ground. Inhaling, looking up at the hands, exhaling, bringing the knees off the mat and lowering down into plank. Chaturanga, it's like a lowered plank. Inhaling into upward facing dog. Taking a few breaths if you'd like. And then pressing back into the downward facing dog. Returning the knees to the mat. And then coming into that seated posture again. Let's bring our legs out in front now, seated. It's always good to incorporate some kind of balancing pose during the practice. As an option, you can sit in a lotus or if you have that lotus right now, and then pressing the arms against the mat, raising the body. Otherwise, you can also have the legs extended, and we can, from here, raise up a little bit, or even press our hips towards the sky. So we'll try that. Seated in staff pose. Our legs extended in front, placing the hands behind, and then pressing the hips up towards the sky into a reverse plank. It's more of a working posture than necessarily balancing, but I guess we're remaining seated throughout this practice. I'm not going to do anything super complicated. Row or anything like that. There's many options to do balance with arm balances. Let's move into some twists. We can do that traditional seated twist, maintaining an awareness that the lower back is a bit flat instead of just kind of rounded like that or letting it go, basically keeping it engaged. With that lower back engaged, pressing forward, bringing one heel against the opposite side hip. And then the other foot on the other side of that front knee. Noticing the release with each breath on that raised side thigh, all the way down to the hips. I believe that's more. There's some gluteal muscles, and there's, of course, the IT band. I'm not sure if it's really stretching the tension fascia lata there. I have to think about that. But it's in that general area that you may feel sensation. Inhaling, bringing the chest opening and bracing the core. Might place the elbow around the front knee, top knee, and then twisting from the lower back towards that raised knee. And staying here for a few breaths. Releasing from that winding stretch. Extending the legs again, and then moving to the other side. Placing the opposite heel against the opposite hip, and bringing that other foot across the front knee. I'm definitely feeling it more into the, I guess, glutes, and maybe it's hard to notice the difference whether a muscle is contracting or stretching in this case. But there's definitely sensation there. Whatever you feel is right as far as releasing or anything that you're working with. Pressing that lower back forward a bit, opening the chest, and then maybe gently hugging that top knee. Feeling the stretch along the raised thigh on the side. Releasing from that stretch, that breathing and releasing. We'll do one more reverse plank to try to give those posterior muscles some engagement. Extending the legs in front, bringing the hands perhaps a bit further behind, and then pressing the hips up towards the sky. Then releasing, staying here for a few moments. We can find ourselves in a seated, cross-legged, or lotus posture. We'll work on some more seated twists here, placing one hand in front and one hand behind, and then twisting to either side, perhaps moving more dynamically in either side, whether you want to remain in one place, breathe and release, or gently twisting to each side. Going within your range, which feels comfortable. Pressing that lower back forward. Working on the musculature around the spine. Then we'll remain here for a few moments, taking some breaths, feeling ourselves sinking down into the mat. And appreciating some of the time that we've had to get our bodies feeling more mobile in the morning. That Thai massage training will probably get me more limber because we're actually going to be working on each other, but it's definitely good to get started with some movement for sure. Appreciating the time that we've taken and becoming aware of the body, allowing it to start firing up, and the breath with the releasing and stretching as well. We'll spend about a few minutes here in meditation. I think we'll put, let's see, I actually got about another 8 minutes. We'll spend 5 minutes in silent meditation. Coming to a seated posture that's comfortable, or as an option, you could also lay down into resting pose, Shavasana. Just resting flat on the back, or even with some support like a pillow. Bringing some final movements into the body before settling into a seated or laying down posture. Appreciating each breath. And we'll just stay here with the posture and the breath. Now bringing some awareness back into our bodies. Maybe returning to that seated posture. I'm actually going to grab one of these books here, a random book, and read a random passage. So let's see what we got here. This is Wuthering Heights. What? Yeah, Wuthering Heights by Emily Brookie. Obviously, it's a classic. So, let me just flip this around a little bit. Okay. We'll end our practice with a random passage from a random book. Just for fun. Here we go. Actually, I don't think you're supposed to look at what's okay. Interesting. Vote for Chip Barron. He will make a great student body president. It's got a picture of a tiger on it. Right. So let's try this one more time. And let's see what we got here. If he had been mad enough to order that proceeding, we had not time. He made no ceremony of knocking or announcing his name. He was master and availed himself of the master's privilege to walk straight in without saying a word. Interesting. Hope you've enjoyed that passage from Wuthering Heights. Haven't read it yet. And thanks for joining for this morning's warming up practice. And have a great day. Namaste.